You can live completely alone today, ordering food, working remote, going days without speaking to another person, and be totally fine. Choosing solitude is a lifestyle choice now. You can even feel connected to people you'll never physically meet. It used to be a death sentence. Not eventually, almost immediately. For most of human history, being cast out of your group didn't mean loneliness. It meant almost certain death, alone in the wild. That instinct never fully left us even now. There was no surviving indefinitely, completely alone, using only what one person could carry. Solo survival without a group's tools and knowledge rarely lasted more than a few weeks. So what happened exactly when ancient humans were exiled? Let's start with why banishment was sometimes considered worse than execution. S14 image prompt. Scene. Parchment info card. Simple icon of a small, tight cluster of 20 to 50 figure dots. Light parchment background. Most hunter-gatherer bands numbered only 20 to 50 people total. Losing that group meant losing the specific knowledge of that exact landscape, where the water was, where predators denned, which plants healed, and which ones killed. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm at the University of Southern California spent decades studying how egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies enforced social rules. Without police, courts, or prisons, in his 1999 book Hierarchy in the Forest, he documented the tools these societies actually used against people who broke the rules. Gossip, public shaming, ridicule. And if none of that worked, ostracism. Complete exclusion from the group. Boehm found that in many of these societies, permanent banishment was considered the harshest punishment available, worse in some cases than execution, because execution ended things quickly. Banishment left a person to face the wilderness completely alone, with none of the tools a group provided. Shared food, shared defense, shared knowledge of the land. It wasn't just a punishment for the body. It was designed to erase you socially before nature finished the job. Boehm documented accounts of exactly what that looked like in practice. Banished individuals found weeks later, killed by exposure, starvation, or predators no group was there to fight off. In the Arctic, the stakes of exclusion were about as extreme as they could get. This wasn't only a prehistoric practice either. In Athens, starting around 508 BCE, citizens could vote once a year to exile someone for 10 years. Not for breaking a law, just for being seen as a dangerous threat to the city. Sometimes simply being too popular, too powerful, or too unpredictable was reason enough. Each citizen scratched a name onto a broken piece of pottery called an ostracon. If enough shards named the same person, that person had 10 days to leave Athens completely. No trial, no appeal, just thousands of shards and a name. The word for the practice was ostracism, the exact word we still use today, thousands of years later. Even Themistocles, the general credited with saving Athens from Persian invasion, was ostracized by his own city years later. Saving the city once bought no permanent immunity from being cast out of it. And Athenian exile wasn't the wilderness. It was usually survivable, even comfortable elsewhere. But it worked because in Athens, a person's entire identity, property, and belonging were tied to that one city. Losing it meant becoming instantly a stranger everywhere else. Anthropologist Jean Briggs lived among the Inuit and published her findings in 1970 in a book called Never in Anger. She documented how Inuit communities maintained order almost entirely through subtle social withdrawal. A cold shoulder, a silence, a refusal to include someone in a hunt. In an environment where surviving even a single week required shared shelter, shared fuel, shared kills, this kind of withdrawal carried enormous weight. Full banishment in the Arctic wasn't an abstract threat. It was functionally a death sentence, and everyone in the community knew it. So banishment was just about being physically alone? Not quite. In many of these societies, exile came with something else. Your name stopped being spoken. Your place at the fire stopped being kept. People acted deliberately as if you no longer existed. Anthropologists call this social death, and it often started before physical death ever did. What does that kind of exclusion actually do to a person? Psychologist Kipling Williams at Purdue University has spent decades studying ostracism specifically. He designed an experiment called cyberball, a simple ball-tossing game rigged so two players quietly excluded a third. Not romantic rejection, but plain exclusion from a group. His research found that even brief, obviously meaningless exclusion, being left out of a simple game with strangers, triggers a rapid, measurable stress response. Even when participants knew the exclusion was random, controlled entirely by a computer, the pain response didn't go away. Brain scans during these experiments lit up in regions closely tied to processing physical pain. Exclusion wasn't just an unpleasant feeling. The body registered it as an actual injury. People report feeling literally less human after even a few minutes of being ignored. Now stretch that feeling out, not minutes, weeks, alone with no group at all. S70 image prompt. Scene. Parchment info card. Simple crossed out only ancient label over a modern prison cell icon. Light parchment background. Modern societies still use enforced isolation deliberately too, as punishment. Psychologist Craig Haney at the University of California, Santa Cruz has spent decades studying the psychological effects of solitary confinement. His research documented a consistent set of symptoms in people held in isolation for extended periods: panic, hallucinations, a loss of stable identity. Some prisoners reported no longer being sure they were real without another person there to confirm it. And the longer the isolation lasted, the harder those symptoms were to reverse. Haney's findings were significant enough to influence U.S. Supreme Court opinions on the practice. Haney has described extended isolation as capable of causing psychological damage comparable to physical torture. The specific tools changed: concrete instead of wilderness, steel doors instead of a closed campfire circle. But the underlying mechanism stayed exactly the same. Modern life removed the physical death sentence, but maybe not all of it. In 2010, researcher Julianne Holt-Lunstad at Brigham Young University published a massive analysis, combining data from over 300,000 people. Her finding, chronic loneliness and social isolation carried a mortality risk comparable to smoking roughly 15 cigarettes a day. Not a metaphor, an actual measurable increase in death risk. That risk rivaled obesity. It exceeded excessive drinking. Multiply that risk across an entire modern city, and it stops sounding like a minor inconvenience. So does modern comfort mean exile finally lost its power? Not exactly. We removed the wolves in the frozen nights. We didn't remove what exclusion does to a human body and mind. Ancient humans who got cast out rarely died from a single dramatic event. They died from the slow accumulation of everything a group quietly provided: food, warmth, defense, information, meaning. Not a single blow, a slow, quiet flicker going out. Take all of that away at once, and the wilderness didn't even need to work very hard. Today, no one drags you out of a village. The distant firelight of other people's lives is now just a phone screen checked again and again for proof someone still sees you. Ancient exile made that erasure physical. Modern isolation just makes it quieter. The pottery shard became a notification badge. The 10-day exile became an unanswered message. The wilderness just moved indoors. Being cast out was never really about location. But isolation still finds the same door in, one quiet week at a time.